Hi, good evening, everybody. This is the October meeting of the Nevada County Camera Club. It's great to see so many familiar faces tonight. I'm Rachel Rosenthal. I'm the president for this year. And tonight, we had originally planned to be in person only, but I think we owe a big round of applause. David Wong has offered his own equipment and is streaming to our members on Zoom out there. And his recording then will be up on the club's website, hopefully within this week. So big thank you to David Wong. And so I'm going to start this the meeting. I'm going to call up Barbara Summers, our membership chair, from the back. She's the lovely lady who's been working the table back there for our new lovely lady. And she's going to welcome our new members and guests. So come on up.
You know,
For the first time in several months, we don't have any new members this month.
wow.
I know it's about 154 members, but we don't have one this month. Next month, we just keep rolling. We have 3 new guests. Jerry, just raise your hand. Where are you? So if you're sitting by her, say hi. Michael? Michael is Therese's husband. Therese's doing the program tonight. And Clark, where are you? There you are. Nice to meet you. Welcome to the meeting. And I think that's it until we're ready to do our announcements. Okay. Okay. Thank you. All right, so I've got several announcements and some folks that she alluded to in the club also. I will start with the save the date. We have our club's annual workshop on Saturday, November 5th, runs from 9 to about 3. And I've sent out an email on that. If you haven't seen the details, and I will send out another one. Is Mike Weitzman and I are co-facilitating. Oh, you're here. Hey, Mike. Co-facilitating the workshop, and there's 2 tracks, so to speak. There'll be one in person, which will have 3 workshops here in this sanctuary. And then the second track, which Mike will be heading up, will be the Zoom track, which will be held in the library. So you can come to the sanctuary, you can do an in-person workshop, you can then transition to the library and participate in an online one as well. So we're going to try this time, and we're looking to have great participation. So I want to ask, how many folks are planning on attending the workshop, either in person or Zoom or both? Oh, excellent. Okay. Thank you. It takes a bit of work to get this set up, and we want to have as many people attend as possible. And you've got several of our club members who have graciously volunteered their time and talent to make this workshop possible for you guys. So on the club's website, there's a little button underneath the slideshow at the top of the page, and there's more information there, and there will be more information coming from me. So stay tuned on that. And then one of the workshops is on framing, and that one is going to be led by Barbara Summers, who just spoke to you, and Dave McClellan. So Barbara, do you want to make an announcement for your workshop? Hers is a little more involved. So
Yeah, I
yes, I do. Just briefly, because you'll need to do a little homework and go get the materials that you need. How many, this is down and dirty, right? How many think they want to attend this framing class? This is for matting and framing and all of that. Okay, all right. So if you change your mind, we will be in this building right after break, so at 11 o'clock until 12:15. And you will need to bring an 8x10 image. You will need to bring a mat with an 8x10 window and an outside border of 11x14 and a frame. And after that, it's going to be hands-on. We'll put the table sets, spread out the stuff, and we'll bring any other materials that you need. And we'll show you how to put together an image for display at gallery. By the way, Ganucci and Gold Country on camera is coming up, and you will want to know how to frame your pictures. Thank you. So thanks, Barbara. And if you haven't seen the email, in online track one with Mike is advanced Photoshop with Kathy Triolo. It's intro to night photography and editing and lightroom with Mike Oitzman, and beginning Photoshop with Mike Shea. Those folks are all here. If you have any questions, please ask them. And then here in track two in the sanctuary starts out with camera basics. Bring your camera and you will get one-on-one help on how to operate it, no matter if you have Canon, Nikon, Sony, or Fuji. And that's led by Mark Triolo, Dave McLean, made up a new last name for him, Dave McClellan, and Bill Wages. The second one is the framing, hands-on framing workshop with Barbara Summers and Dave McClellan. And after lunch is electronic lighting. So many possibilities with Douglas Hooper. So, all right. Next announcement is, as you all, many of you know, we have the critique that happens each month, and you enter your photos into one of the 16 categories. And so each fall, the board does a review of those categories, and some years we make edits and some years we don't, depending on what the participation has been in those categories. So the board recently took a look at the categories and decided to leave them the same for 2023. So there are no changes to the photo categories for next year. So next up, I'm going to ask David Wong. He's chairing our nominations committee because it's quickly getting time for the club to elect the officers for 2023. And so call David up and he can share with us where we are in the nominations process.
So we have coming up, the nominations are actually in November where we do the voting. And right now we have four offices that have to be filled. We have president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. And we have in the people that have graciously volunteered, and we'll take more people if you'd like to run for any positions. We have right now Mike Shea that's willing to run as president.
Mike, can you raise your hand so people know who you are?
There's Mike there. And we have Grace. Grace, are you here? Grace, stand up. And she has put her name in the hat for vice president. For secretary, Laura, is Laura here? No, Laura Freeman has volunteered to run again for secretary. And for treasurer, we have David Nelson here, who is volunteered for that stuff. So big round of applause and appreciation for all those. And if you would like to run for any of those offices, let me know, because the voting will take place at next month's meeting. And I think that's it.
So thank you to David and the committee that's been working on that. And I will say the club, if you're interested in getting involved, we would love to have you. Just come talk to me at the break. There are other positions in this club where we would love to have additional help. So don't hesitate. It's a great group. So Barbara mentioned the club, our Granucci exhibition, which will happen as part of the Photography Month next March and April. The call for art deadline for the Granucci is November 30th. So just keep that in mind. But that is all right. Other announcements. Call on Ann Wessling about exhibitions. She wanted to share something with you. So come on up.
I'll just stand right here and talk loud.
They can't hear you.
Can't hear. Okay. All right.
Sorry.
So for Photography Month, since there are several months between now and April, if you want to hold a personal exhibit and you know how to do that and all, please let me know so I can include you in the publicity. We do have one extra exhibit that's going on. It'll be by Dick Mooney, and it will be at the Edward Jones Gallery. Many of you old timers will probably remember Dick. So I will include that that publicity in the publicity plan. So for those of you that like to do special exhibits on your own, please keep me in mind. Let me know if you have them planned and I'll add you to the mix. So thank you.
And if you don't know, Anne is our publicity chair. She gets our club's name out into the local media, so does an awesome job. All right, so next announcement is Kathy Triolo, our vice president, wanted to make an announcement about a field trip.
Yeah, well, sort of workshop.
Yeah.
Okay. The only reason we're not calling it a field trip is because it's not club sanctioned at this moment. Maybe down the road, but right now, no. So I sent out an email through our chat group, and it was an exploratory email to see how many of you would be interested in joining Bill Wages and myself next October. We're planning ahead, obviously, to go to Bodie and Mono Lake. And we would have access to the inside of the buildings. There are 6 buildings that are open, including the old Bodie's mercantile store. It just opened and I was there 2 weeks ago on a workshop with Betty Cedarquist. And so there's 6 buildings that are open to private tours, and this would be a private tour. We're looking at a maximum of 8 people, and we might have reached that already, but we might be able to expand to 10. And we don't have dates yet. It should be next October because we're thinking of combining this with, you know, fall colors, right? What better thing to do? So the other thing we'll be doing is shooting at sunrise at Mono Lake. So hopefully there'll be some clouds. There weren't clouds when I was there a couple of weeks ago, but that's okay. We have something called sky replacement. Don't listen, Tom Quinn. So anyway, if you are interested in learning more about this trip, please come talk to me either during the break or afterwards. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you, Kathy. So David, you want to come on up? We have another opportunity. So this is David Wong.
Forgot to mention field trips. We're going to plan a number of field trips this year and into next year. If anybody would like to take the field trip coordinator position, I would be happy to. The field trips under discussion so far, just so that you know. We have obviously winter winds, you know, bird migration that will be coming up in the next couple of months. It's been suggested that we do something with the night lights at Nevada City and Christmas lights. We're going to set up a date for that. John Siebert, I talked to John this morning while he was bending my leg in therapy. And John they have this cyclocross thing. And we thought this would be a great opportunity, especially if it's raining and there's mud floating and stuff like that. So I don't know if John has some dates, then maybe rather than read them here, see John, raise your hand, John. So right there. Yeah. So if you're interested in that, that'll be a lot of fun because there's a lot of, you know, action and thrills and spills and stuff with these crazy guys, you know, people on their bikes. So I think there's 2 or 3 opportunities not far from here. Right.
So they'll be in Folsom, around Folsom area, a couple races a month through December. So about another 4 more races.
You want to describe any of this? What happens?
Yeah, I think you did a good job, and then I'll put it in the email blog so it's easy.
Yeah, so if you're interested, this will be something fun and it's different than what we, you know, instead of just doing birds and landscaping and people, you know, flipping over on bicycles and sliding in the mud, stuff like that. So if you have any other thoughts for field trips, let me know. Just wanted to mention those. Thanks.
All right, 2 other last quick announcements before I turn it over for our presentation is Jim Bear had an announcement he would like to make. So come on up, Jim.
I want to announce that
John is selling camera insurance. A little while ago, I got a call from a woman named Kit Chestnut. And I was very surprised. She said, do you want to buy some photographs? And I thought, that's the wrong verb. I want to sell something. And she said, no, I really, a guy who was a member of the camera club and is a really well-known photographer, unfortunately died several months ago, and he has a house full of photographic stuff. The thing that is most interesting is a name we all know, a guy that I've known as a photographer for 40 years, Steve Solinsky. And Steve is he produced some of the photographs that Warren Brooks, the past photographer, has in his house. So they're trying to dispose of the estate, and there's a lot of stuff. But here tonight are 3 Steve Solinsky's on the back chairs facing backwards. And they're all for sale. They don't know what to ask for them. And of course, you all know Steve is very famous. So if you're at all interested, I don't see people with pen and paper, but I can give you the name of the daughter of Warren Brooks, who is in charge of disposing of the estate. And Diane, if you call her, then you can make arrangements to buy one, or just between us guys and gals, you can make an offer tonight. And have a real Steve Solinsky of your own to go home with, if you haven't. Okay, thanks.
All right.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. One last one is Dave Arstein's joining us from Nevada via Zoom, but he asked me to announce to you guys that the Banner Mountain Artisans Show exhibition is coming up. It is November 19th from 10 to 5 at the Elks Lodge in Nevada City, and our very own Bill Wages is one of the artisans in that exhibition. So be sure to stop by and see his work and the other artisans as well. And with that, completes our mini announcements of tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Trailer, our Vice President, who will introduce our speaker.
And thank you, Rachel. Okay. So tonight I'm really excited about having Therese here. She kind of runs under the radar, I think. Yeah, she'll agree. But she's got a very interesting past. And one of the things that we were talking about at dinner was that she was part of a Pulitzer Prize winning journalistic team at the Mercury News in San Jose. So she has a nice certificate from the Pulitzer, I guess it's the committee, thank you, and is proud of that. But the other thing she's very proud of is getting into the state fair this year and being able to show some of her current work. So she has a history of being a journalist, a journalistic writer, and also a photographer. So at this point, her and her husband, Michael, are traveling the world and are writing travel writers. She has explained to me that in America, we call them travel writers. In Europe, they call them travel bloggers. So whichever one you choose to call her, all I know is she's an amazing writer, speaker, and photographer. And so let me present Therese Ikonian. Thank you very much. Here's Therese.
By the way, I don't replace skies. No, I don't replace skies, and I don't add rainbows, and I don't do any of that other kind of funky stuff.
Oh, Tom was kind of to give her a kidding.
Who was applauding at that?
Over there.
Yeah, right. No.
Let me give you a hint. It's about ready to top
I know.
because this is not set.
When I was in public speaking in high school, there was a team in my area, and they used to call them the Beacon Moving Men, because they always moved everything around when they got into the front of the room. They used to move everything around, so I'm just trying to become a beacon moving person, because that's what you do best.
Okay.
Okay. My name's Therese, by the way. Thanks for having me. This is very exciting. And Kathy, right, I do kind of run a little under the radar. I'm not quite sure why, but I do. Probably because Michael and I travel so much that we just don't get that involved necessarily locally. So I'm hoping, I know some people don't necessarily like to take questions during a presentation, and some people do. I would say that I really prefer kind of more of a discussion and an interactive kind of thing. So ask a question along the way, however you feel like it. And if I don't want to answer that time, I'll just tell you to go away and we'll answer it later or something instead. So that's one of the ground rules. And I will make a note of it because as a journalist, that's what I do best. Here I am juggling newspapers and things, notebooks and stuff. So anyway, I have a little show and tell. This is probably my first camera.
Yeah.
Did anybody else have one of these? Yeah, see? Okay, so I found this. I still have this in a drawer. I know it's not worth something. My mom would have said it might be worth something. It's not worth anything.
It's worth something to you.
I know, it's like, I even have, remember those little 3M labels that used to like dial the letter on them and like click things?
I know.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I still have that on the back. It says Ikonian, so, this is the real deal. But I will tell you that my first real love as a budding photographer in college was my Nikon FM. Josh is saying, yes, I know that. Yes, and I love this little camera, and it's what gave me my entry into photography, really, because I was a journalism major. Writing is what I was going to be doing, but I went to San Francisco State, and all my professors were professional journalists. They worked with the Chronicle or the Examiner or something like that. So they were very adamant about the fact that we all needed to be able to do everything. Writers needed to take photos, and photographers needed to be able to write in some way. So I dutifully went down to the photography department with my got my Nikon FM, went down to the photography department and took several semesters of photography classes. And I'll tell you, I fell in love with being in the darkroom. Isn't that just, do they even still go to the darkroom these days? I guess it's Lightroom now, huh? Not darkroom. Bob still does darkroom. I love the darkroom. So I really fell in love with that, but answer the phone. I'm not here. It was something that, really appealed to me. Actually, go ahead and take the next photo. Next. I wanted to show you my Nikon FM. I found this selfie of myself. That was the selfie of yore, right? When you had to actually hold the camera and hope you had it positioned just right into the place where you were getting your reflection. So that's 1981. And I guess I don't really look like that anymore, do I? What can I say? But in any case, after college, I decided to focus mostly on writing. And that's what I did for a number of decades. It was just something that appealed to me. And I worked at daily newspaper, which gave me a lot of lessons. Kathy mentioned that I was luckily a part of the San Jose Mercury News, a part of the news team where we won the Pulitzer Prize for the cover of the Loma Prieta earthquake. For those of us who were actually in San Jose for the earthquake, we all have some stories we could tell about there and doing what we did. Soon after that, however, I left. And so I started freelancing. I was still writing. I clipped a few photos now and then, but it was really a big deal. Fast forward maybe 25 or 30 years. Yeah, just a few years like that. It was not only 30, it was like 25 or 30 years. And I kept talking about, we were starting to travel more. And I kept talking about how I wanted to take better photos. I had this little tiny point and shoot, not the point and shoots of today, but the little tiny, like a little Olympus thing that did nothing. And I kept complaining about how it was frustrating me. For several years, this is frustrating me. I really should probably try to get back into photography, blah, blah. And then my lovely husband called my bluff. And he bought me a little Nikon kit, just, I don't know, probably wasn't more than about 8 years ago or something like that. And it was a D90. If anybody knows what a D90 was, it had like 12 megapixels or something like that. And that's what I was shooting when I joined the China trip in 2016 with David and Barbara. And I knew nothing. I was like completely over my head. I was like, oh my God, when am I even shooting? I have no idea. So I moved on from there very slowly but surely. Go ahead and take the next photo and we'll sort of move into some things here. In 2018, I decided to take, I decided I needed to get serious, and I took, I wanted to find a workshop somewhere that was going to push me in some way, shape, or form. And we were, of course, our travel blog, I will say blog, our travel writing was developing pretty strongly, and we're beginning to get known also for some illustrations. They weren't necessarily what they are now. So we were traveling quite a bit, and I had a little window, and I had this window in the calendar, and I could find a workshop in this certain phase, and I found one. And it happened to be night photography. Little did I think I was going to a night photography workshop to do stars and moons, right? I mean, that was kind of stupid when I think about it. I'm going to a night photography workshop. What else do you shoot at a night photography workshop, right? Stars and moons and things like that. I will say that it probably in the end kind of changed my life. It was something that I have a bunch of night photos later on in this presentation I want to talk about that mean a lot to me, that are a big part of what I do when I'm also traveling. But in terms of travel photography, I think that having been a journalist and having been a daily newspaper journalist, that I developed a feeling for just being able to walk into situations and say hi to people and meet people and bring them into conversation and kind of chat them up and make conversation, which has really helped as a photographer. I'm sure you guys, I mean, I'm so honored to be here, even talking to so many great photographers. But there are a number of people I know who tell me, oh, I just can't take a picture of a person. I'm so shy. How am I going to do that? And I know a lot of you do, so that's fine too. But there's a lot of people I know who are taking pictures of walls constantly. And that's not really what travel photography is about. I'll step back. Well, let me step back to this one. So let's just get into a few photos here. Very often when you're traveling, I don't know about you, but I personally find faces really, really fascinating, especially different cultural faces and what they're expressing about their culture. This one, I can't say, this is in Kenya, and it was last summer. And we had an amazing experience. I took lots of pictures of animals. I'm not really a wildlife photographer, but I took lots of pictures of animals. But probably what really fascinated me were the pictures of people. Have anybody here been to Kenya, right? I'm sure there's a few, yeah. Did you do the Maasai village experience? Right. So you know when you go to do this extra visit to a Maasai village, that it's a hair bit contrived. People know you're going to be there, but the beauty of it is you also can take pictures of them. Because in that culture, of course, you can't just randomly take pictures of people on the street. It's considered a very big no-no. People have died. And you really don't want to die in Kenya. This was in a little tiny, one of the little tiny huts. The hut was probably hardly much bigger than this little tiny platform right up here. And we were all jammed into it, trying to get photos of a couple of the warriors who were telling us stories. I think we were very lucky with the lighting. And this photo was actually the photo that was accepted at the State Fair this year, which was really quite an honor. Next. This is in Meknes, Morocco. And who else been to Morocco? Nobody's been to Morocco. Oh, one person. Okay, a couple people did it. Okay. Morocco is an interesting country when you're traveling in it because there are definitive rules about taking pictures of people. But I found that because, let me step back 1 second. I speak German fluently. I studied in German. I speak some French reasonably, probably when I went to Morocco a little better than I do right now. And I found that being able to speak German, French, and English has really helped me around the country talk to people. So in the case of this man, for example, I ended up just walking over to his little booth. And let me describe his little booth. This little area that you see, that's his house. That's not his office, that's his house. He lives there and works there. And I was actually standing on a ladder that was probably about 4 feet tall, little bitty wood ladder. And this thing was probably about maybe 5 feet tall off the ground. It was like this little cubie. And what I find I often do in different countries is I approach people, I don't even pick up my camera, right? The camera's just there. And I just start talking to them about what they're doing, and I'm admiring their work, and I'm just chatting them up about where they're living and how pretty everything is, and establishing kind of a relationship with them in some way. And then in the case of this man, I was asking about what he was doing. And then eventually I was like, gosh, can I take some photos? And he was like, sure, you can take some photos. So I ended up with what I actually really love because of the look on his face. Next. Anybody have any questions about
What was he doing?
He was so, okay, go back one. He was sewing. He was like weaving these things, making little buttons and stuff. Yeah, it's like they are very big on their buttons over there. So it's this long, see that device over there? And the string was coming into that, and he was making these like covered button things. Does that make sense? Yes.
So somebody in the audience out there asked the question you heard before. Do you get model releases overseas? Any of that type of stuff?
That would depend on the country.
Could you
which
repeat the question?
The question was, does she get model releases?
Some countries, if you think you're going to be using a photo somewhere, you definitively need to have a model release.
When you
I can't
come.
say Done it
Hi, baby.
regularly. In cases like, David, you'll remember this photo. In cases like, China and Morocco, they're pretty loosey-goosey about that kind of thing. So you could actually do get faces. You probably won't really ever need a model release. Whereas we do a lot of traveling in Europe and the more developed Western countries. If you do get a face, and we often avoid faces and avoid kids if we can, if we don't have permission, you certainly would need a model release. In Germany in particular, where we happen to spend quite a bit of time as our base camp and traveling around Europe, they're very particular about privacy. If you just pick up a camera and point it in somebody's direction, they'll freak out and come running over to you and say, oh, no, don't take a photo, don't take a photo. I was taking some pictures once in a park of some just general activity, but because there were some kids running around there in the front playing a game, one of the mothers ended up coming over to me and saying, excuse me, which child is yours? And I said, well, none. And she goes, well, who are you taking a picture of? I said, well, I'm not taking a picture of the kids. I'm taking a picture of just kind of this general activity and scenery. So, but if I'd gotten a picture of the kid, A, I wouldn't run it because she would never have given me permission. I would never have used it. But B, you certainly would have needed a model of it. Does that make any kind of sense whatsoever? In Morocco, you had to be very particular about not taking pictures of women. So although I like taking pictures on the street and of people, you have to certainly be respectful of what their culture and religion expects and desires. I have no pictures of women's faces in Morocco because that's just a complete no-no.
How do you learn what the guidelines are in different countries?
There's a lot online that tells you what different countries expect legally and what they can allow. I mean, frankly, in Germany, there was one time somebody ran up to me, I was taking a picture at a public market, and there might have been some generic people wandering around. That really wouldn't have been legal. But they're so sensitive there that somebody came over to me and said, don't take any pictures. It's like, okay, fine, I won't take any pictures of you. But research online, there are several places that, and I can't remember them exactly, I'm sorry, right off, that do summarize the status in probably some of the more popular countries. In places like Africa, you're not necessarily, in some countries, not all of them, of course, in Kenya, you may not get the need for a model release, but you also need to certainly just respect their religion and their culture and what they want and don't want. So do a search on privacy laws in different countries and you'll find what you're looking for. So this was in China on the infamous 2016 trip with David Wong and Barbara. And this is a face that is to die for, I would say. I was actually had a slightly longer lens and I was a little bit away from him when I snapped that picture, so he probably had no idea I was taking the picture. I don't think I would worry about a model release with him if I did ever do anything with the photo. Next. I don't have a model release from her either. That was in Berlin at a special event, but she was a public performer. She was entertaining at this event. So they are expecting you to take pictures. In fact, when I actually was chatting her up and coaxed her to kind of turn sort of toward me in some way. And I just snapped a whole bunch of pictures of her with her crystal ball. We actually posted that one on Instagram back then. That was a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, when I say pre-COVID, right? So it's probably 2019. And she interacted with us on Instagram and had no problem with it because she's a public entertainer. There was one other incident, I don't have a picture up here of that. I will get into some photos from Ukraine and Chernobyl that I went to. Has anybody here been to Ukraine or Chernobyl? Okay, I have a number of pictures I put together. And in that case, I was there for the Epiphany, which is January 6th. And because of the religion, they have a custom where they all go down to the river and they dip in this cold river in January. Not something I really wanted to do, but okay, they do it. And they have to do 3 little dips up and down the river. It's part of a religious experience. Probably someone else can explain it personally better than I can. But again, I felt like I was invading their privacy and just taking pictures of people in their bathing suits. It somehow just didn't feel quite right. So I took some generic overview shots and things. And then I started walking into the group. And there was a woman and I think her son. And she kind of smiled at me. So I walked up to her and just kind of asked her a little bit about that event. Turned out she didn't speak English, but she spoke German. Okay. So we kind of exchanged some words in German and talked about what was going on and why. And then I asked her if I should take some photos. And at that point, I had a relationship with her. And she said, sure, you can take some photos. Next. Okay, sometimes then, as you know, being farther away, like we talked about, she's not really recognizable. That was a passing shot. Everybody knows where that is, right? Who could miss Badwater Basin? And I was out there walking around with friends, scouting some possible, what we maybe wanted to do that night for photos. And this woman started kind of floating across the whiteness of the Badwater Basin. And all I know is I just whipped around and started taking some photos, and I had no idea what I got. But there's something about the beauty of her in white on the white Badwater Basin that with her hiking boots and her white flowing dress that is sort of appealing. Any questions so far or comments? Yes. Yes.
You said it, go on, footprint or?
That's interesting. As I mentioned, my Nikon FM camera, 100% manual camera. So when I learned photography, I learned only manual. That's how I shot, only manual. And I know a lot of people these days tell you to put it on auto ISO and then don't worry about something else, whatever. Everybody has their thing. I'm still a manual shooter. And that's just what I do. It drives me crazy when the camera takes control of something. So I have this habit of when I move into a certain situation, like if I come out of maybe a hotel onto the street or I'm moving into a market, I have this habit of sort of looking at my camera and presetting what I think will be a generic sort of exposure, what I think I might want in terms of f-stop or something, or speed, depending. And hopefully that it will work and maybe I can just adjust a little up or down after that. And then I shoot with that. And then along the way, like in that case, it was actually getting dark. So along the way that I might stop and I'll like, okay, fine, I'm all right here. Okay, fine, that's good. Now I kind of move around shooting again. That's just one of the habits that I've personally developed. Anybody else do that? David, of course, says that. Yeah, if you fool with the camera constantly, it's annoying and you miss shots. And again, I guess I'm a control freak. I don't like the idea of giving the camera my control because I might want, I'm very big on blur, which you see, I really like blur, showing action and energy in something, and I don't want the camera to tell me that my shutter speed should be 4%. Okay. Next, what is next? Ah, there's another shot that they will recognize. That was all people are trying to figure, man, that looks really orange up on the screen. Okay, anyway, for some, perhaps too much activity. I will tell you, I like all the activity in this photo. I really like that there's so much going on. I love the fact that that woman right there is staring at me, wondering what I'm doing. I will tell you, I was shooting from the hip with this photo, which I also do quite a bit. I'm talking about getting into like in the markets in Fez or in Morocco. I find I shoot from the hip quite a bit. It's also something I did a lot in college with a manual camera, and I still do it. Especially when you're out in the streets of whatever country, you can't always pick your camera up and take the photo you want. So I just open it a little bit wider so I can catch things, knowing I can crop a little bit, and I kind of have to practice with it, but shooting from the hip. And next. So sometimes you have to cut off faces. Sometimes cutting off the faces can also, in my opinion, tell a story of what you're experiencing on a travel or any other place. What do you see in this photo? I'm sorry? What is War Memorial?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the wrinkled arm putting a rose down?
Yeah.
Probably lost somebody. I will tell you that that was at the dedication, the end of July, of the Korean War Memorial Wall of Remembrance. I don't know if any of you have heard of that. They actually inaugurated this entire wall of names. Before it was just the memorial with statues, and they added this whole wall of names. This is my uncle right here. And so I was invited as a family member to come to the opening that was just for family. And it was pretty moving. We didn't take a lot of photos during the family session until toward the end. And I did not, again, want to invade people's privacy, but I took photos not showing the faces. And as you said, this gentleman over there, I did not want a long aperture on that either. I wanted to focus on the rose and her arm. Next. That's a funky shot, but I will tell you with my cell phone. I was standing in front of a hotel in LA, and there was something about the street and this guy, talking about street photography, I guess, that I just found kind of appealing, and I just picked up my cell phone and kind of shot. Again, cut off his head, because I thought that I sometimes really like things that are kind of breaking the rules. You know, it's a little crooked, I cut off his head, it's a little abstract, and it kind of appeals to me. So sometimes I do that. That actually was an honorable mention in a minimalist photo contest. Next. I was loitering in DC's Union Station. And I was just standing in a corner because there was this nifty light kind of coming in, and there were just people moving everywhere. And when that woman just stood there with her, I guess they're called taxi shoes, because you can't walk in them, I'm not really sure. But she was obviously waiting for someone, right? And she loved that. Yeah. And that person was probably late, right? Yeah. Any other questions so far? Comments? Yes.
Was her foot actually held in that position, or was it tapping, impatient?
Well, obviously, there's no blur, so I managed to catch her in a moment of stillness. I think she was, as I recall, this is probably 3 years ago too. I think she was doing occasional movements, and I think I shot a number of photos and managed to catch that moment of stillness with her foot, with other people kind of moving around. That's the beauty of standing and waiting quite a bit. There was another time in Morocco, I'll go back to Morocco again, where there were some women making bread in this little kind of open street market area. Knowing that they don't really like photos taken of them, I basically stood across the little street, camera at my side, just watching them. And they noticed me there. And then I slowly kind of moved forward. And then I kind of stood and I looked at the bread for a while. And then I engaged her in conversation a little bit. And then she was smiling at me and nodding, and I was commenting at the bread. And then eventually I was able to pick up my camera and say, can I take some photos? And she said yes. So that's what I did. And and that was in relationship with this, that has to do with what I love, is just standing and waiting and watching a scene develop in some way and catching that moment that you're waiting for, or at least you hope happens, right? Next. Okay, and sometimes we put ourselves in the photo. This is my husband, Michael, who's sitting back there. And this was also in Morocco, as a matter of fact. Yeah. They were so into it. And that little boy, I don't know what he's doing with his hand, but that's what little boys do, right? Sometimes when we're interacting with people and we were interacting with them, they knew we were coming, they knew we were gonna take photos. So it was like a pre-approved situation in some way that we could take photos of them. And that was also my cell phone. I didn't think of it. Because that was able to move quickly with her high-fiving Michael. Next. Yes, sir, ma'am, where are you? Yes,
I see Michael's got a camera strapped to his waist.
yes.
So,
Actually, it's not strapped to his waist, it's hanging over his neck. He just got a backpack on because we were actually on a pretty long hike that day too, going through this little village.
does he shoot, does he ever carry, do either of them ever carry two cameras?
Yes,
And have one fixed lens camera shooting the hip or?
yeah. We both have two cameras. I carry two cameras with separate lenses relatively often. Primarily when I'm sort of more on assignment and journalistically interviewing people, because it's easier to switch back and forth between and not say, excuse me, hold that a minute when I change the lens. So I tend to do that more. If I'm on the street, I don't like dealing with two cameras so much. And I'll pick an intermediate lens length. I tend to like to personally shoot wider and closer, as you can probably see in a lot of these photos. I don't get far away that much. I like wider and closer. So I tend to put on, very often I'll have on right now 17 to 28. That's probably one of my favorites.
Preset ISO 400.
I preset the ISO for what I think is going to be happening.
Okay.
I'm not always right, but I do kind of preset that.
You don't endeavor to control exposure with the ISO on scene.
On auto, you mean?
Yeah, well, not on auto, adjusting the ISO on scene.
Oh, yeah, no, I sometimes do that too, but I like to, because in my opinion, you never know what's gonna happen. When you're traveling, you never know what's gonna happen in front of you on the street or in a market or in a store or whatever. So I like to always have the camera sort of set for what seems like would be an appropriate setting for the place I'm in. And then I'll change it if I'm moving settings, because it doesn't always work someplace else, the same setting. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yes, because you know what the light, you can translate in the head,
Yes,
how much light there is and light.
yes, I'll say, okay, well, this is X. I know I'm not gonna need I know I want the background blurred, so I might do a wider f-stop, or I maybe want this, so I'll do a longer f-stop, or gee, I'm gonna need to be able to freeze motion, so I'll make sure that I just sort of guesstimate with the exposure triangle, how it's gonna be needed in that situation, and what kind of look I think I might be looking for or approaching in that situation. But you have to know your exposure triangle pretty well to do that. And how they interact together. And I'm sure most of you know that. Next. Okay, now we've got a few here where I'm going to say are sort of that blur. I love movement when I'm traveling. I really love showing an activity of a place with some kind of activity and movement going on. To me, it just says a lot about energy and the place and activity. This was at Brandenburg Gate in Berlin. Probably a lot of you have seen that before. If you haven't been there, you probably know it. So that's Brandenburg Gate, which is a complete hub of activity night and day. Except of course during COVID, when a friend of mine who lived there gave me pictures and it was deserted, which is crazy. But this is actually relatively low activity, but the cyclists and the colors and the people taking photos, it's kind of crazy what's going on. Next. And there's another one. And this was again in Morocco. So another one of my reasons for blurring, for using a slower shutter speed in cases like this would also be, what do you think? I heard a bunch of mumbles.
Anonymity.
Yes, so I'm also able to take pictures in a place where then I'm not gonna really need photo releases. And I don't feel like I'm invading someone's privacy. So that's another reason for me, not only expresses the energy and the movement in the place, but it also allows me to take photos in ways that I might not be able to otherwise. Oh, there's two hands up. Oh my goodness. Behind.
Hi, you find sometimes you can gain a little confidence if you show them a shot or two on the screen. And get it just taken.
Yeah, that could happen if you're in the,
People are amazed that this device can do that.
yes.
Softens.
It can help. It depends on the situation you're in. You know, in a situation like this, I can't go. This is a gate into the old town, and people at the end of the day are like crazy, running back and forth, shopping, going home, and ready to make dinner on it. I wouldn't go running over to them and say, "Excuse me." But if you're in a situation like, say, I mentioned the women making bread in Morocco at that time, it would be fine for me to show the photo. We did that when we were in Kenya. I mean, the little kids were just amazed at the photos and they were giggling and laughing about all this stuff. So that's certainly an approach you can use, depending on your relationship with your subject and how close you think you are with them. And if you think they want to see it or not, it's a judgment you kind of have to make on site, but sure. You had a question.
Was this handheld?
As a matter of fact, that was handheld. I love my tripod, particularly for night stuff, but those things were all handheld. I tend to do a lot of handheld. I can handheld probably down to 15th even. For sure 25. And it depends on if, like in this case, I might have been like leaning against the wall and doing that sort of prop yourself, kind of take a breath, inhale, hold your breath, take a photo, you know, kind of to keep any jiggling out of it. So yeah.
I had to ask you because the things that are still are in pretty good focus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Still have fluid motion.
Uh-huh.
Combination.
Yeah, and I love that. I don't know, it's just something I love. You know, you started to follow up with a question. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. The one behind you. Yes. Okay, it looked like you still had something else and I already, sorry. Okay.
Those people.
Next.
That's dangerous.
Josh. There's another one you'll recognize in China. That was a handheld pan whip sort of thing. Again, expressing energy and movement on the square in Kunming that Barbara knows oh so well. And of course, I'm not sure I need to worry about anonymity with her little pig mask on. But in any case, there you go. Let's see. Let's see. Yes. Okay. That one. And we all recognize that, right? Because that is the Nevada County Fair. And that was probably in 2019 again. It's like, okay, pre-COVID, post-COVID. There's still kind of a movement. And again, it's probably breaking what I would call are the common rules. It's a little offset, it's centered right, you know, it's what I find a little discordant in an uncomfortable way, but getting uncomfortable is sometimes a good thing.
you know, you were so fortunate that you had, women there that had really long hair, but you had such, you know, an exciting, you know, position.
Well, I will tell you, I probably stood there for a half an hour. Waiting for the right movement and waiting for the right set of writers with the right kind of hair.
Did well.
Thank you.
You could do hair replacement.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, next, what's next? Oh, okay, I just wanted to show a couple of oddball abstract things because I am known to gravitate toward weird shadows and lights and oddball things. And this was actually in Berlin at a garden exposition, just probably in September, actually.
Yeah.
I was waiting. That is actually a piece of art, and there were a bunch of mirrors. These are columns that are mirrors with sawdust around them in kind of a circle. So they're reflecting everything around them. The trick, of course, was keeping myself out of the photo, right? Like, where can I stand? Oh, shit, stand there. Oh, where can I stand? But I managed to get myself out of the photo, and it's just all the reflections on the mirrors of the grass that was around it and the sawdust and stuff.
Right.
Thank you. I like that description. You said that? Okay, yeah. Strikingly. Okay, so there's one more next. It's of the abstract art. Who doesn't do stairs, right? I have this addiction to stairs and other things. And this just happened to be the stairs in a lighthouse in North Carolina's Outer Banks. FYI, I did desaturate some of the areas to give it a slightly more black and white feel without eliminating all of the color out of it. I just wanted a little bit more of a odd kind of abstract feel to it. And a lot of people, of course, took the photos just like down, but I like the discordance of the finished line.
Better aimed.
Better than that. Okay, oh yeah, okay, so this is a whole series I have. What are we doing time wise, Catherine? Okay. So let's stop here for 1 second. Questions, comments, other themes about travel or just general? We're gonna forget, this is actually in Kyiv, FYI, so we'll go back to that in a second, but anything else that you're like, oh, I wanted to address this about travel or that?
A quick question, follow up on the whole privacy thing.
Yes,
Is that it almost sounded like the issue of pointing the camera at someone was the issue. And the quote unquote shooting from the hip was less of an issue. Maybe again, it depends on where you are on the cultural thing. But you kind of see what I'm getting at is the invasion of privacy, the pointing of the instrument, or is it the capturing of the person?
depends on the country. If I captured an image, even without them knowing it, of their face in a country, again, like Germany or France. I think France is pretty picky about that too, just like Germany is, right? Even if they didn't see me taking it, it still would be something that if they found it for some strange reason, it would could still be a problem. But even if I'm taking a picture on the street or in some place of people, they're gonna freak out even if they see the camera, even if I'm not taking a photo. So I find sometimes shooting from the hip allows me to at least get a photo without necessarily getting a face or getting somebody who might be bothered by it. And it doesn't change their activity. One more second, it doesn't change their reaction and their activity and what they're doing. It's very often they see the camera, they start doing things differently, right? Have you experienced that? Oh, I'm gonna close now.
What's even worse when you pay people to pose. Some of the Tibetan monk pictures drive me nuts with the distance. But anyway, that's it.
No, I agree completely. I don't replace skies and I don't add rainbows and I don't pay people to post.
But the whole concept of maybe travel photography versus street photography.
Yeah.
There is a distinction. The capturing of people going about their lives, sometimes sad, sometimes happy, sometimes tragic, is really the essence of good street photography.
Yeah,
And I wrestle with this one personally.
Yeah.
Where that privacy line is, where. What you're capturing.
I would say I wrestle with that also. I would personally like to do more street photography. I really gravitate toward it. I love what you say, capturing that moment in time of happiness and sadness, the moment that won't repeat itself and all of those things. It's more and more difficult in today's world, I must say. And just getting someone's back can certainly be at times a great photo. I certainly have back photos that are quite appealing, but it's not really what it's all about in terms of getting their faces. The world's getting much more picky about their images being shown somewhere. So
You look
it's
at the great street photographers of the early to mid 20th
Yes.
century, and they couldn't do what they did.
absolutely agreed. They could not do today what they did then. They would need model releases and I'd have to probably pay money and who knows what. That's a whole different conversation. And maybe you need a true real life street photographer. And I will say, I mean, someone who really does that kind of thing. A number of years ago, I went to a presentation by Germans are kind of interesting folks sometimes. And he had gone and spent like, I don't know, several months in New York, in Brooklyn, and he was doing this exhibition of his photos, and they were all these really crazy, frankly, embarrassing photos. People making funny faces and they're moving and they're looking kind of weird and stuff. And he thought it was the coolest thing. And I'm like, you're invading their privacy. That's ugly and it's inappropriate and you didn't get model releases for any of these people. So I don't really agree with that kind of thing, but it's a struggle. Agreed. Does anybody have any answers to that or comments about that? No?
We lived in East Africa. You with the camera, people dive into the bushes, run. Oh, yeah. They turn around, or throw something at you. So you walk up basically with the camera right there in your face.
Yeah.
And that's the thing you have to really, you have to sort of train yourself in the cultural aspects, what people will accept.
Mhm.
You know, Muslim, I'm not trying to offend them.
Mhm.
They're also.
Right.
You know, but yet they don't allow you in certain instances.
Mhm.
You know, it's getting to know the people, approaching them culturally, making them feel comfortable,
Mhm.
listening more than talking,
Mhm.
and being able to integrate yourself, you know, into it.
Mhm.
A scene for which they will accept you.
Mhm.
Basically.
Mhm. Absolutely right. Totally right. And the Muslim thing, Michael and I have spent time in Qatar and in Morocco and a couple of Muslim countries, and and you can't be culturally insensitive. You have to really pay attention to that. I think that's entirely appropriate. David?
Having been on trips with Therese, I think one of the things that she oftentimes would not be where we were in the crowd. Therese would wander off and she'd go and look for something. And I think in seeing Therese's progression of photography, she looks kind of for other stories, humanity, something that, and I think that's what's engaging about what I find about her work, that she and Michael don't just, oh, here's the scene that everybody gets.
Mhm.
And I, this is a comment, I think that's the beauty of her stuff. And also, she has a certain aspect of time in her photos that a lot of people don't incorporate. Whether it's blur or motion or whatever, there's an element of time. And I just make that up as an observation. And it'd be interesting for you to travel with her, I would think.
I appreciate that comment, David. It's very insightful. I also resemble the comment, I think, because I am the first person when I go out, even with workshops or groups, kind of go that way, if they go back. Partly because a group, if you're trying to take photos, I mean, when you're a mob, this doesn't quite work, you know, I like the camera being subtle. The other reason, like, one second, one of these, I like short lenses, and I will comment about that. One of the reasons I also will like the wide angle lenses is I can be looking at this, and the person there has no idea I'm taking their photo, or that scene, because if I did, I'm still gonna be sensitive to their faces and things. But if they thought I was, they'd be going, oh. And they'd leave, right? Okay. Yes, you have, you,
In our country, you get Amish, you know. So,
oh, yeah.
so I have talked to them, and tried to establish the connection. And then I asked them, can I take a picture?
Well, and that's a religious observance, so you have to they respect that. For sure. Yeah. Kathy, how long?
You now have 20 minutes.
20 minutes till end of everything or end of
End
questions?
of everything.
End of everything. Okay, then let's scooch through some of this stuff and we'll deal with things later. In January 2018, excuse me, 2020, January 2020, remember that timing? I had the opportunity to go to Ukraine and Chernobyl. We spent 3 nights, 4 days in Chernobyl, i.e. the excluded zone where the reactor exploded. We spent a couple days before, a couple days afterwards, in Kyiv. So it's this current war has struck me quite hard because of the people. I know they're in everything too. And I feel like I had this amazing opportunity, not knowing that I had this amazing opportunity before COVID, when the world shut down, and then the war, and you just can't really even go to Chernobyl anymore because of the way the Russians picked up all the radiation and everything. So those were just a couple of scenes you saw, but go back one, please, Josh. No, back another one. There. This was a building called the UFO building, and it was very difficult to shoot. Perhaps you can see lots of busy streets, a little tiny median island, and no place to do anything. No, I did not have a tripod. I was asking about handheld over here. But I thought the only way I can do this is to get some kind of motion into it, because otherwise it's just going to become this ugly building sitting there with like cars in front of it. And so that's what I did with that. And it was handheld, and I can't tell you how fast it was and how slow it was. So there you go. Okay, next. And then this, you know, in this case, I probably wouldn't do anything with this photo because that guy's like really recognizable. Probably if he's still alive, incidentally, or, but, yeah, exactly. So the motion again of the train moving, also handheld, no tripod. I find tripods in situations like this can be very intrusive. You know, people definitely notice you more than not. Next. This was the one that prompted, I think, me being here. This was the best of show at this year's county fair here. And this is also in Chernobyl. And this was the abandoned pool complex. I was with a small group of people, and one guy ended up climbing up on top of the pool decks with the light, and I placed the light back behind there. And it was an amazing experience. Next. This is the hospital complex where they took all of the first responders who all eventually died after the explosion. We were allowed to walk through the hospital complex, but they warned you not to put anything down or touch anything because there still might be a radioactive bandage somewhere. And I said, what about my tripod? I didn't have my tripod when we went back there at night, actually. And they said, oh, just wipe off the feet afterwards. Okay, next. Classic pictures from Chernobyl and its town and devastation. The gas mask there, as our guide told us, was probably placed by some tour guide who wanted to give a Chernobyl-like experience to his guests. Next. And again, to me, all of the empty hallways and buildings spoke of ghosts. I'm sure there are probably spirits wandering through all of these places. And so I had to set up a tripod, because of course that was okay there. This was not the hospital, it's another building. And put myself in it to sort of be reminiscent of movement in the hallway. Next. This is just for fun, because this is what used to be a very fancy riverside cafe in the town of Pripyat, which was the big fancy town there. And this was one of our guides showing what it used to look like. These guys were a couple of guys in our group, and they were looking at a place where there was a very high radiation count going off. Next. Chernobyl experience. It was very moving. Next. I don't know if any of you ever heard of the dogs at Chernobyl? Yeah. I don't know what's happened to them now, but there are at least hundreds of dogs who were part of the dogs who lived there with the families who had to be left behind and live for themselves. And there were still a lot of dogs, and they loved people when they came. And when we were getting ready to leave, look at those eyes, we just want to take them home. But we were told not to touch them because they're running off into the bushes where we don't go because of radioactivity. Next. This was reactor 5 that never was completed. They were building the cooling tower when reactor 4 blew. And so this one was left as was. We were told not to walk in the center because that's where the radioactivity tended to gather more. Am I glowing? Next. Okay, next. This is the control room for reactor 4, where everything happened. Where the button was pushed when it shouldn't have been pushed, etc. All of the controls or buttons are gone. They were all over the years after that stolen. So there's nothing there. They're all just empty things. Next. Oh, we didn't get to spend more than about a couple of minutes in that room because they were still worried about some radioactivity possibility. Okay, next. And this is the famous Ferris wheel. We did have an opportunity in our group to spend about 2 hours one night doing some shooting. That's why the pool shot exists, and that's why this one exists. And I did have someone shooting a flashlight and kind of light painting the Ferris wheel for that shot.
Was it a timed exposure on this one?
With a lot, people in here people do light painting, I'm guessing. Some of you do light painting, John?
Yeah.
Yeah. Very often with light painting, you don't really have to worry necessarily about the length of exposure, the time of the exposure, as you do the settings. So in this case, I had my camera just held open till I was finished directing this guy to finish painting, lighting part of it, and then I shut the shutter.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Next. Okay. Over the years, and I have a bunch of night photos I want to kind of zoom through here yet at the end. A couple of things I've fallen in love with on my travels are lighthouses. I've become a lighthouse chaser in the last couple of years. You'll see a bunch of lighthouses later. This is Pemaquid Point in Maine, and this one got a best in show at the International Food Line Travelers Association contest a few years ago. It's kind of a famous puddle that exists there, and I've seen a bunch of reflection shots. Has anybody else seen the reflection shots of this famous puddle at Pemaquid? There are some out there. What's interesting is David also knows I tend to get down on the ground a lot, and I was actually probably on my belly in that shot because that was really the only way you could really get like up enough of the building for the reflection and not just little pieces of it. Next. Body Lighthouse in North Carolina. You're going to see a bunch of North Carolina lighthouse shots because I was just there at the end of June, beginning of July. So they were handy and kind of fun, and those were all a bunch of night shots. And this was a puddle that just happened to exist in the parking lot. And Body Lighthouse is spelled like Bodie, but don't say Bodie. It's actually pronounced Body. So I think next. Okay, we're moving into some more of the night stuff. This was a photo from Morocco, from in the Sahara. And I was very pleased when in 2020, it was 3rd in the Washington Post travel photo contest. Made me pretty happy. I spent a lot of dancing around that we had ridden camels at sunset and then gotten off. And that was our young man driving our camels, Mustafa. I think this was Alibaba. I think that was the camel's name. And the other one was named Marlon, just so you know, the other camel. And you know, I spent a lot of time dancing around behind him, trying to get the sun and the rest of the scene just right. I probably have, I don't know how many photos, and this one just kind of posed just right. Next. Night photography has really become one of my true passions. I love documenting and archiving. You'll see some, you know, really photojournalistic kind of stuff in a lot of what I've done earlier too. I really like documenting and showing the culture and people and energy of a place. But to me, the night scenes are also so incredible. And that sparked from my 2018 workshop that I went to and discovered this love for the art and science. And I'll say that on purpose, the art, science, and math, and I know John, you do part of it too, of night photography. I mean, you can be out there for hours trying to do one shot. So it became my first experience, very transformational. It was an experience that I went to at this workshop, never realizing how much I was going to have to give up control and fail. I mean, honestly, fail and go, oh, I can't do this. It was very frustrating. And then after a couple of days, it all kind of clicked. And I began to realize how I could play with the exposures and the speeds and everything more. Of course, you get into all the calculations that go with night photography to try to get the exposures right. And that's a whole nother, that's why I say science and math with night photography. It's become quite a love. This is actually at a historic pioneer cemetery on the hill. That light glow below the Milky Way over there is Fort Bragg. So, and that's probably 10 or 12 miles away. So you can see how light pollution really affects our world. And this was a pioneer cemetery that my dear husband agreed to get up with me at 3 a.m. one morning to hike a couple miles up to the cemetery, because that's when the Milky Way was going to be out, and place some lights and do a little light painting and get that photo.
Is that Mendocino?
Yes, Mendocino County. It's north of Fort Bragg. This is called Newport, the Newport Ranch area, and this is the Newport Cemetery, and it is accessible up on the hill. Next. Just a random shot that appeals to me. It has a little tiny, again, everybody else, this is addresses David, everybody else went off someplace else, and I said, you know, I really like that really remote back cove, they call it, area in Maine. That's where when I first drove up to it, there was a Mainer. Has anybody here from Maine? Okay, there was a Mainer on a boat, and I had a couple cameras over my shoulder, and I get out and he looks down at me, he goes, "Are you a shooter?" Yeah. And I said, "Yeah, I'm a shooter." He goes, "Oh, have you been able to back home yet?" And I said, "No, I haven't." Because when you drive on this road and you turn right, and my dock is the one XYZ, and you have permission to go. And I went, okay. So that was kind of more blue. Next. Road tripping, solo road tripping, or half solo road tripping, I want to call it, became something that I became completely addicted to in COVID. This shot to me really says a little bit about the peace and quiet and solitude and serenity that you can get in doing night photography. This was probably, this was my first road trip. And I was a road trip to and from like workshops or groups, and then add on days before and after and go out and do probably some pretty crazy things. We'll explain some of them in a second. And my girlfriend and I, who went out there, probably spent 4 or 5 hours like on the Mesquite Dunes in Death Valley, taking all kinds of shots of the dunes, which were completely amazing and memorable. But you have to hike out a little ways to get to the amazing. Next. Did I hear it? Yeah. Canyon Overlook? Zion. Canyon Overlook. That was April. And I road tripped to Zion, going down the Eastern Sierra, which I totally love. And then coming back up through weird Nevada, experiencing all kinds of crazy weird stuff. But this was again, I guess, this is the Canyon Overlook, and most people, it goes kind of all around this way, and everybody was down there. And before night really fell, I was like wandering, hiking up on the rocks and going, oh, I like this back part better. So that was, I had to experiment with different exposures because you never knew what cars were gonna come through and you were gonna manage to actually get the cars to. Comments, questions?
Yeah, is that a 30-second exposure?
I would have to check. I think it was longer. I think I might have been
Yeah.
closer to a minute or so.
Yeah.
I think in this case, I was just playing with settings as the cars were going. It was getting dark and I kept having to change it because it kept getting darker and darker and I kept having to change it.
Yeah.
But it was one take. It didn't do anything to it. It was one take. No replacing skies or anything. Didn't add a rainbow either. Yeah,
I think the sky is part of the most interesting
isn't it?
shot to me because it's indescribable.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I love it. Kind of pulls you into it, doesn't it? Next. Does this look familiar to anybody? Does anybody happen to know this? No, but close. I have one of those coming up. This is the St. Thomas ghost town that is on the dry lake bed of Lake Mead. And on my way back from my Zion trip, I went through Valley of Fire, where they're very strict about being out there at night. Unfortunately, yes, 5 minutes, maybe 8 or 7 minutes. So this, I had to hike 2 miles out from where you parked across the dry lake bed to get to this. I did it at the end of the day, so it was still sort of light twilight. But then I set up for my shot and placed a couple of lights. And then it got dark, which is what it does in the photography. And way up out there, you can't see it really here, where my car was parked, I could actually see sort of 2 miles out. I was by myself, FYI. I do a lot of these crazy things by myself at night, road tripping by myself. Assessing the risk and taking on the risk that I think is appropriate. And I think the only risk out there was maybe a snake or something like that. And I saw lights dancing around where my car was, and I had reception, so I was like texting with Michael saying, okay, I see some lights by my car, but I think I'm okay. I've still got some processing, I've still got some photos to take care of. How are we doing? I gotta get my photo. That was probably those were some lights of Las Vegas in the background, also including stuff. Next. This was fun. Of course, we all know this, right? We got home from Europe on March 14th, I think it was 2020. And I got home going, okay, here we are. And then suddenly I went, oh goodness gracious. I've always hated the fact that I couldn't get any photos of Nevada City with all those dumb cars parked on the street. So I thought, I'm gonna be outside. There's no reason why I can't go out there. I'm not gonna get anything. Did anybody else do that?
Yep.
Yeah, wasn't it awesome? And so, I have numerous ones, but I was just like, look at that. Beautiful Nevada City street with no cars. Except, and of course, COVID, how long did I have to wait for just like one car to go by? Right? Whatever. Next. Berlin, at the Christmas market called at a place called Red City Hall. I went out to take the last photo before we were going to be leaving, and I was bemoaning the fact that it rained. When I got there, I went, yes, it rained. Yes. Okay, now who said before where the other one was? Raleigh. Okay, Raleigh. I was there on November 6th, or whatever election day was, 2020. Appropriate place to be. So yeah, Raleigh. Next. I've got a short series here, 6 photos of, we'll run through them, of Go back to the lighthouse. Okay, so I've got several photos from Cape Hatteras, 3 photos, we'll just run through them, of Cape Hatteras Lighthouse, North Carolina, and like 3 photos from Bonnie Lighthouse, all night photos. And we're gonna run through this to get it right. This was the Lightkeeper's house at Cape Hatteras Lighthouse, gorgeous. Next. This was Cape Hatteras, again, part of the Lightkeeper's house. I can't tell you how hard I worked for that photo, because I was dodging in camera to try to get the light beams just right. It was a very long experience, but I finally got it. Next. That's the Lightkeeper's house from a different angle. at Cape Hatteras. Next. And that is Cape Hatteras Lighthouse. Thank you. Next. Now we're moving on to Body Lighthouse. I think I've got 3 of that. This one was actually in the fair here too. And again, everybody was setting up down on the green around the lighthouse. Has anybody been there here? And no, go back. And I went all the way out this boardwalk and there was no one out there and it was like, next. And then I was trying to get some star circles, and I think I probably shot an hour, quarter hour and a half but then the clouds moved in, so I think I only ended up using about half of my shots because that allowed me to get some clouds and some stars. And I think some errant car in the parking lot graciously painted the lighthouse for me. I didn't do that, but it was great. Next. Here we go. There's information, and that's me climbing into crazy places, either get up or get down or crawl under, or kind of whatever happens. Somebody, that was in Suara, Morocco, on the city wall. I'm surprised that some god hasn't struck me down for climbing on the city wall. Did I sort of make time?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Great. No questions, but I can't. So I'll hang around.
During the break.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Therese.
Let me take my Instamatic camera.
Thank you.
On my line.
Thank you, Therese. Okay. Is this on? No.
Hold on.
It's okay.
Okay.
Oh, hey, I've got power now. All right. So thank you, Teresa. We're going to take a short break, about 10 minutes. Please, reset refreshments in the back, some cookies, some coffee. What is it? Oh, and prints back there for your consideration, and some extra hard drives. I will give them too. So please
Hold on, we're almost.
have some coffee, cookies, and then when we come back, I'll announce the winners from last month's photo